They were the picture of black excellence, a power couple admired by many. Taneesha and Donovan Whitfield had built a life that others envied, a marriage that seemed unshakable. Success, wealth, and influence, it was all theirs. From the outside, they embodied love, commitment, and the rewards of hard work. But behind the filtered photos and curated perfection, cracks were forming. A temptation too strong to resist. A betrayal too deep to forgive. And a deadly decision that would turn their dream life into a nightmare. How does a love story filled with passion and devotion descend into violence? What happens when the truth we fear most is the one we can no longer outrun? Before we dive into this shocking case, like this video and subscribe for more chilling tales of love, deception, and deadly consequences. Taneesha Whitfield was the kind of woman people wanted to be, or at least, that's what her thousands of social media followers believed. She had built an empire in Atlanta's high-stakes real estate market, becoming the go-to agent for celebrities, athletes, and the city's elite. Every closing was celebrated with a champagne toast, every success carefully documented in Instagram-worthy snapshots. Her brand was polished, flawless, inspiring. She made it look effortless. Luxury vacations in the Maldives, exclusive networking events with the city's most powerful figures, gala nights draped in designer gowns. But behind the filters and carefully curated captions was a woman who was beginning to feel the weight of maintaining perfection. Her days were filled with deals and dollar signs, but her nights were spent in a home that felt colder with each passing year. Donovan Whitfield was the opposite of the flash and flare that defined Taneesha's world. A respected financial consultant, he was a man of numbers and logic, the steady force behind their power couple status. They had met in college, Spelman and Morehouse, the classic HBCU love story. He had been drawn to her confidence. She had been drawn to his discipline. Together they had built a life that people envied. Their wedding had been the kind of event that made headlines, black tie, six-figure budget, held at one of Atlanta's most prestigious venues. Their home, a sleek, modern estate in Buckhead, was the kind of place where success was expected, not just admired. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl, raised with the same values that had gotten them to where they were: excellence, ambition, and an unwavering commitment to legacy. But marriage is never just about what the world sees. And what the world didn't see was the distance growing between them. Donovan was methodical, calculated, always thinking 3 steps ahead. His love was practical: provision, stability, structure. Taneesha, on the other hand, craved passion, spontaneity, something deeper than shared bank accounts and investment portfolios. At first, she convinced herself it was just a phase, that all marriages had seasons of disconnect. But seasons had turned into years, and the loneliness that settled in her chest no longer felt temporary. Yet to the public, they were perfect. Black excellence personified. A testament to what could be achieved with hard work, loyalty, and faith. Friends admired them. Family praised them. Strangers wanted what they had. No one saw the fractures forming beneath the surface. Khalil Mosley was the kind of man who made women forget themselves. Charismatic, smooth-talking, and effortlessly confident, he had a presence that demanded attention. A self-made entrepreneur in Atlanta's high-end car rental business, he catered to the city's elite, providing exotic vehicles to rappers, athletes, and executives who wanted to make an impression. But Khalil didn't just sell cars, he sold a lifestyle. And he lived by his own rules. Taneesha first met him at an exclusive property showing in Buckhead. He wasn't looking for a house, he was looking at her. The way his gaze lingered made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Desired. Seen. Not as a wife, not as a mother, not as the picture-perfect real estate mogul, but as a woman. At first, it was innocent. A harmless flirtation, the kind that made her blush but could be brushed off as playful banter. But Khalil wasn't the type to be ignored. He studied her, picked up on her insecurities without her saying a word. He knew she was lonely before she admitted it to herself. The text started casually. "I hope you're having a good day here. Thinking about you there." But soon they became something else. Late-night conversations that lasted for hours. Secrets whispered over drinks in dimly lit lounges. The kind of attention that made her heart race in a way Donovan never did anymore. Taneesha had never intended to cheat. She was a woman of discipline, a woman of control. But Khalil made her feel alive. He wasn't predictable. He wasn't routine. He was a risk, and she had spent so many years living safely that the danger felt intoxicating. It started with stolen moments, quick meetups between showings, secret rendezvous at upscale hotels where no one would recognize her. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered promise pulled her deeper into something she swore she could manage. She convinced herself that it was just a phase, an escape, something she could stop whenever she wanted. But Khalil had different plans. He wasn't satisfied being a side piece, a secret hidden in the shadows. He wanted more. At first, his demands were subtle. He would joke about her leaving Donovan, about what their life could be like if she stopped pretending. But as weeks turned into months, his patience thinned. The stolen moments weren't enough anymore. He wanted to be acknowledged, to be part of her world in the way Donovan was. Taneesha tried to reassure him, to buy herself more time. She told herself she could balance both lives, that she could be the devoted wife and the passionate lover as long as she was careful. But the truth was catching up with her. And Khalil wasn't going to wait forever. Taneesha had convinced herself that she was careful, that she had covered her tracks well enough. A second phone, cash payments at hotels, private browsing modes, she had done everything to ensure secrecy. But she underestimated Khalil. The warnings had come in whispers at first. A hint of frustration in his voice when she canceled plans. A sharp edge in his tone when she pulled away after sex instead of staying wrapped up in him. Then, it escalated. "How long you think you can keep living two lives, Taneesha?" His words weren't just jealousy. They were a threat disguised as love. She should have ended it then. She should have cut ties before Khalil made good on his promise. But she hesitated, too afraid to lose him, too comfortable in the fantasy he provided. Then, the email arrived. It was an ordinary morning, just like any other. Donovan had been in his home office, sipping black coffee, sifting through emails before heading out for a meeting. Taneesha was upstairs getting dressed when she heard the heavy footsteps coming down the hall. Not hurried. Not angry. Just deliberate. She turned just in time to see him standing in the doorway, phone in hand, his expression unreadable. "You want to explain this?" Her stomach dropped. She didn't have to look to know what he was showing her. Explicit photos. The ones Khalil had taken when she was too lost in passion to think. Hotel receipts from their secret meetups. Screenshots of texts she had sworn she deleted. Everything. Taneesha felt like she was suffocating. "Baby, let me explain." Donovan didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just stared at her, his face empty of emotion. Then, without a word, he turned around, walked into their bedroom, and started packing a bag. Taneesha followed him, her voice trembling. "Donovan, please." He zipped the suitcase, grabbed his car keys, and brushed past her as if she didn't exist. The sound of the front door closing was deafening. Then came the silence. No screaming. No accusations. Just a void. She tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. She texted, begged, pleaded. Nothing. It was like he had vanished, wiping her from his life in an instant. Panic set in. She didn't know what to do, who to turn to. Then, against all logic, she called the one person responsible for this mess. Khalil answered on the first ring, his voice laced with amusement. "Took you long enough. You did this," she hissed, voice shaking. "Why? Why?" He chuckled. "Because I got tired of being your dirty little secret." You ain't gotta hide no more, baby. Now you're free to be with me. She felt sick. He thought this was what she wanted. He thought he had done her a favor. Reality hit her like a freight train. She had never been in control. Khalil had been pulling the strings all along. And now she was trapped. Taneesha had spent the last 24 hours spiraling. Donovan was gone. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls from friends, cryptic messages from nosy acquaintances, speculation on social media. And Khalil wasn't done with her. He had texted her earlier that evening. Khalil, meet me tonight. We got unfinished business. Taneesha, Khalil, please. Just leave it alone. Khalil, nah. You ain't callin' the shots no more. She couldn't let this continue. The scandal was already suffocating her, eating away at everything she had built. She needed to stop him. And so, she made a decision, one she couldn't take back. She sent him an address. A rental property she managed, one that was unoccupied. It was secluded, far from the city, the perfect place for a conversation that no one else needed to hear. Khalil arrived with his usual swagger, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. He thought he had won. Now that wasn't so hard, was it? He smirked as he stepped inside, looking around. Nice spot. You buyin' me a house now? Taneesha forced a smile, playing along. She had prepared 2 glasses of whiskey, her hands trembling slightly as she handed him one. I need to make things right, she whispered. He took a sip, watching her closely. Right, huh? He chuckled. Baby, you still think you got a say in this? She sat beside him, hard hammering. What do you want, Khalil? He leaned in, brushing his fingers against her thigh. I want you. She fought back the revulsion crawling up her spine. His lips curled into a smirk. You really thought you could play me? Something inside her snapped. Without thinking, without hesitation, she grabbed the hammer she had hidden beneath the couch cushion and swung it against the back of his skull. The sickening crack echoed through the empty house. Khalil staggered forward, a strangled groan escaping his lips as blood trickled down his forehead. But he wasn't dead. He turned, eyes burning with fury. You crazy bee, she didn't let him finish. She lunged at him, the kitchen knife already in her hand. The blade sank into his chest. His eyes widened in shock, mouth opening in a silent scream. She pulled the knife out and stabbed him again. And again. The room was filled with the wet sound of the blade meeting flesh, the metallic scent of blood saturating the air. She didn't stop until he stopped moving. Silence. Her body trembled as she stepped back, staring at the lifeless heap on the floor. Blood pooled around him, seeping into the cracks of the hardwood. She couldn't breathe. She had to get rid of him. She wrapped his body in plastic, struggling to maneuver his dead weight. She barely managed to drag him to the trunk of her car, her hands slick with sweat and blood. She drove for hours, her mind blank with panic, searching for a place, any place, to dispose of him. Finally, she found an abandoned construction site on the outskirts of town. It was deserted, silent, the perfect place to bury a secret. She covered his corpse in dirt and debris, her muscles aching with every frantic movement. But as she turned to leave, something caught her eye. His phone. It wasn't in his pocket. It wasn't anywhere near the body. Cold dread washed over her. She had missed something. The news broke like an earthquake, sending shockwaves through Atlanta's elite circles and beyond. Khalil Mosley, missing. At first, it was just a small blip in the news cycle. Another missing person, another case to be solved. But then the details started to emerge. Surveillance footage placed Khalil and Taneesha together on the night of his disappearance. The rental property where she lured him was under her name. And then, the damning revelation, a text message sent by Khalil to a friend minutes before their meeting. If I don't make it out, Taneesha did it. The moment that message leaked to the public, the case exploded. The media feasted on the scandal. Taneesha Whitfield, the glamorous, successful real estate mogul, wife of a respected financial consultant, mother of two, was now the prime suspect in a murder investigation. News stations ran endless loops of her photos, polished, smiling, perfect. Headlines screamed across the internet, from power couple to prime suspect, the fall of Taneesha Whitfield. Affair, betrayal, murder, inside Atlanta's most shocking scandal. But nothing compared to the moment of her arrest. The footage played on every major network. A fleet of police cars swarmed her gated community, their red and blue lights cutting through the night. Officers stormed into her house, guns drawn, as she stood frozen in her silk robe, clutching her chest in horror. Her children screamed as officers handcuffed her, her youngest trying to claw his way toward her while being held back. The look on her face, a mixture of disbelief and terror, was immortalized in a single, viral image. Social media erupted. Damn, this is some Lifetime movie type of mess. If she's guilty, she deserves everything coming to her. Something about this don't sit right. Ain't no way she did this alone. I need a documentary. Now. As investigators dug deeper, the evidence stacked against her. Traces of blood, Khalil's blood, were found in her car. Tiny droplets, barely visible to the naked eye, but damning under forensic testing. Cell phone data placed her near the abandoned construction site where his body was eventually discovered. The Earth had tried to keep her secret, but it hadn't been enough. Then came the voice memos. Detectives combing through Khalil's phone found recorded conversations. Pieces of arguments between him and Taneesha, stitched together in chilling fragments. Khalil's voice, low and threatening, "You really think you gone just walk away from me?" Taneesha, panicked, "Please, just stop. Just leave me alone." Khalil, laughing, "Nah, baby. You belong to me now." Public opinion became a war zone. Some saw her as a victim, pushed into a corner by a man who refused to let go, a woman who had made a desperate choice. Others saw something else entirely, a calculated killer who had lured a man to his death, all to protect her image, her lifestyle, her secrets. Talk shows debated her fate. Podcasts dissected every piece of evidence. Comment sections were flooded with theories. If she was a man, y'all would be saying self-defense. She could have gone to the police. She had options. Nah, she was trying to cover her tracks. You don't stab someone multiple times unless it's personal. As she sat in a cold interrogation room, hands shackled to the table, Taneesha knew one thing for certain. The picture-perfect life she had built was gone. And the world was waiting to watch her fall. The search for justice was swift and relentless. Investigators pieced together the truth like a puzzle, each revelation more damning than the last. They traced Taneesha's movements, pulled phone records, examined security footage, and combed through the digital footprints she thought had been erased. Every step she took that night led them to the same conclusion: this wasn't just a crime of passion. This was premeditated. The prosecution wasted no time in building their case. They framed Taneesha as a woman consumed by greed, status, and self-preservation. A woman who had spent years crafting the illusion of a perfect life, only to kill the moment it all threatened to crumble. The evidence speaks for itself, the lead prosecutor declared in court, pacing before the jury. Mrs. Whitfield didn't just lash out in self-defense. She lured Khalil Mosley to that rental property. She planned this. And when he refused to disappear from her life quietly, she made sure he'd never speak again. The jury watched in horror as the prosecution presented graphic images: Khalil's body, battered and stabbed, the blood-soaked floor where he took his last breath. The courtroom was silent as they played his final text: "If I don't make it out, Taneesha did it." Her defense team fought back. They painted a different picture: a woman trapped, terrorized, and pushed to her breaking point. They introduced the voice memos as proof that Khalil had been threatening her, that he had no intention of walking away from their affair without destruction in his wake. Taneesha Whitfield is not a monster, her lawyer pleaded, voice thick with emotion. She was a woman backed into a corner, desperate to escape a man who refused to let her go. Did she make a terrible mistake? Yes. But does she deserve to spend the rest of her life behind bars for it? No. But it wasn't enough. The jury saw the crime scene. They saw the methodical cleanup, the attempt to bury a man like he was nothing. They saw the blood in her car, the deliberate way she hid his body. They deliberated for only 6 hours. When they returned, the courtroom was silent as the foreman stood. On the charge of second-degree murder, we find the defendant guilty. Taneesha gasped, her hands trembling. A sharp, choked sob escaped her lips. The judge didn't waver as he read her sentence, 30 years in prison. No possibility of parole for 20. The gallery erupted. Some wept. Some nodded in approval. Others whispered, shaking their heads. Taneesha turned to look for Donovan in the crowd, searching for the man who had once loved her so deeply, the man she had betrayed. But he wasn't there. He hadn't shown up for the verdict. Days later, divorce papers arrived at the prison. A single note was attached in his neat, calculated handwriting. This is the last thing I'll ever give you. And just like that, the man she had built her life with was gone. Her children, her babies, were gone too. Taken away from the wreckage she had created. Taneesha had once been the picture of black excellence. Now, she was nothing more than another inmate, another headline, another cautionary tale of how quickly a life built on secrets could come crashing down. And there was no coming back from it. This case is a chilling reminder of how love, deception, and desperation can lead to unthinkable consequences. Taneesha Whitfield had everything: a thriving career, a beautiful family, and a carefully curated life that others envied. But beneath the surface, cracks had begun to form. A yearning for excitement, a dangerous attraction, and a web of secrets she thought she could control. She had convinced herself she could have it all, the stability of her marriage and the thrill of forbidden passion. But in the end, the weight of her double life crushed her. Khalil Mosley was supposed to be a distraction, a spark in a life that had grown too predictable. But he became much more than that. His presence, his persistence, and ultimately his threats, pushed Taneesha into a corner she couldn't escape. Maybe she never meant for things to spiral so far. Maybe she truly believed she could walk away unscathed. But when the moment of reckoning came, she didn't choose honesty. She didn't choose accountability. She chose silence, deception, and then violence. Her choices left devastation in their wake. A man lost his life in a brutal, desperate act. Her husband, once her greatest ally, became her most distant stranger. Her children, once her entire world, would now grow up without her. The respect and admiration she had spent years cultivating vanished overnight, replaced by headlines branding her as a cold-blooded killer. Could this tragedy have been avoided if Taneesha had been honest from the start? If she had walked away from the affair before it spiraled out of control? If she had chosen confession over cover-up? Some believe she was a woman manipulated, cornered by a man who refused to let her go. Others argue that she brought her fate upon herself, that her own greed, her own need for control, led her to that fateful night. Now, she wakes up every day behind bars, trading designer suits for a prison uniform, lavish vacations for the cold reality of a cell. No more perfectly staged Instagram posts. No more admiration from strangers. Just time, endless time, to relive the choices that destroyed everything. One decision. One moment of desperation. One irreversible act of violence. And a lifetime of regret. If this story shocked you, like and subscribe for more cases exploring the darkest intersections of love, betrayal, and murder.